The porch of my parents' house creaked under my boots, a familiar groan blending with the hum of bees in the blooming lilacs. It was Easter brunch, and the late April sun warmed the tray of lemon scones I'd baked at dawn, their citrusy steam curling like a promise. I adjusted the lavender scarf around my neck, its wool soft but frayed, a gift from my mother at 22, offered with a tight smile and no words. Through the open window, my sister Clara's laughter rang, bright and commanding, a conductor mid-symphony. I rang the bell, my stomach knotted with fragile hope that this year might be different. My mother opened the door, her eyes skimming me like a book she'd already shelved. "Lila, you're here," she said, her tone polite but thin as tissue. She glanced at the scones, but didn't reach for them, so I carried them inside, the tray heavy in my hands. The dining room was a tableau of ritual, my father at the head, glasses low as he scanned a newspaper. Clara, radiant in a tailored blazer, gesturing animatedly. My brother Mark, scrolling his phone, tie loose. The table gleamed with crystal and china, the air thick with rosemary and fresh bread, but the warmth stopped at my skin. I set the scones beside Clara's tower of store-bought croissants, their golden edges mocking my effort. "Lemon," I said, voice tentative. I added zest for extra flavor. Clara flicked her eyes toward me, mid-story about her law firm's merger. "Cute," she said, turning back to my father. No one else looked up. I slid into a chair at the table's edge, the wood cold against my palms, and sipped my tea, its chamomile bitter. I'd come to share my news. My graphic design portfolio had won a regional award, a milestone after years of freelance hustle. I'd rehearsed the words in the car, imagining their nods, maybe a smile. Clara's voice rose, detailing her promotion to partner. My father's rare smile bloomed, reserved for her. Mark chimed in about his tech startup's funding, and my mother refilled his coffee, her face glowing. I waited, fingers tracing the scarf's frayed edge. "So, I have some news, too," I started, louder than intended. "My portfolio won." "Oh, Lila, one sec," Clara cut in, turning to my father. "Dad, tell them about the investor you met." He launched into a story, voice warm with pride. My words dissolved into the clatter of forks. I bit my lip, the sting of being sidelined as familiar as the scarf's weight. Then it came, sharp as a blade. My mother set down her fork, eyes on me, calm but unyielding. "Lila, we've been reflecting," she said, as if discussing a budget. Having a third child was a mistake. We were stretched thin, emotionally, financially. It wasn't fair to you or us. My father nodded. "It's not personal, just reality." The room spun. The scone's citrus scent turned cloying, their warmth mocking me. Clara sipped her mimosa, unbothered. Mark shifted but stayed silent. I waited for a laugh, a retraction, but the silence roared. My face burned, throat tight. "You regret me?" I whispered. My mother frowned, folding her napkin. "Don't be dramatic, Lila. We love you. It's just the truth." Clara rolled her eyes. "You always make everything so heavy." I stood, chair scraping the hardwood. The scarf caught on the table, unraveling a thread. "I need to go," I said, grabbing my bag. No one stopped me. The hallway was dim, lined with photos. Clara's graduation, Mark's wedding, a trip I wasn't on. My high school portrait was gone, replaced by a blank square, edges dusted with neglect. I pressed a hand to the wall, knees buckling under the weight of erasure. Outside, the spring air was crisp, but it couldn't douse the fire in my chest. I whispered to the empty street, "They don't get to decide my worth." My apartment was a cocoon of chaos, the air thick with stale coffee, and the faint burn of lavender candles I'd lit to calm my nerves. The living room mirrored my unraveling. Sketchpads spilled across the couch, half-finished canvases leaned against the walls, their colors muted under dust. I hung my scarf on its hook, the frayed edge catching the dim light, and sank onto the floor, back against the couch's worn upholstery. The silence was suffocating, as if grief had moved in while I was gone. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. Instead, I opened the bottom drawer of my desk, where I kept relics of a life I'd tried to bury. Old sketchbooks, faded birthday cards, a chipped ceramic mug I'd made at 12, its glaze uneven but earnest. My fingers brushed a leather-bound diary, its spine cracked from years of secrets. I hesitated, the weight pulling me back to a version of myself I'd almost forgotten. I opened it to a page dated 10 years ago, when I was 19, my handwriting tight with hope. I stayed up all night finishing Mom's birthday painting. Maybe this time she'll hang it. The memory stung like a fresh cut. I'd given her the painting, a watercolor of our old garden, roses blooming in defiant reds and pinks. She'd smiled, called it sweet, and tucked it in a closet behind old coats. Clara's law school acceptance letter went on the fridge that same week, pinned with a star-shaped magnet. I flipped another page, finding a line from when I was 15. They forgot my art show. Again. Mark said I'm too sensitive. The words were a map, charting moments I'd been sidelined, taught to shrink. Another memory surfaced, sharper, from when I was 11. It was a Saturday, and I'd spent the morning decorating the living room for Clara's 16th birthday. I'd strung paper lanterns, their soft glow my offering to her light. I'd drawn a card, a sketch of her laughing, and tucked it beside her cake. When the party started, the room filled with her friends, my parents beaming as she opened gifts. My card went unnoticed, left under a napkin. Later, I found it in the trash, the ink smudged. My mother had said, "Lila, don't sulk. It's her day." I'd nodded, swallowing the hurt. But that night, I wrote in my diary, "I'm a ghost in this house." The memory clawed at me now, a wound I'd bandaged with smiles. Was I too sensitive, as they claimed? Or had I been erased, piece by piece, until I believed I deserved it? The question roared louder than the city's hum outside. Another moment flashed. I was 9, standing outside the kitchen, bare feet cold on the tile. I'd overheard my mother's voice, low and sharp. "We should have stopped at 2. Lila's too much." My father's reply was resigned. "She's here now. We'll manage." I'd run to my room, buried my face in my pillow, and smiled through dinner, pretending I hadn't heard. But the truth had rooted itself, a quiet poison I'd carried for 20 years. I closed the diary, chest tight. I needed perspective, someone to cut through the fog. I texted Sarah, my college mentor, whose bluntness had always grounded me. "Can we talk? Family stuff." Her reply was instant. "Come over, bring wine." Sarah's loft was a haven of turpentine and cedar, her easels crowded with bold abstracts that pulsed with life. She poured me a glass of Merlot, her silver hair catching the lamplight as she listened. I spilled the brunch disaster, voice cracking as I repeated my mother's words. They said I was a mistake. I described the photos, the missing portrait, the scones no one touched. "I've been trying to matter my whole life," I said, staring at the floor. "What if I'm the problem?" Sarah leaned back, eyes sharp. "Lila, they're not your mirror. You've been begging for their approval since you were a kid, and they've got none to give. They're limited, not you." She sipped her wine, voice softening but firm. "You're not invisible. You're looking at the wrong people to see you. Stop chasing ghosts." Her words were a slap and a lifeline, slicing through self-doubt. I drove home under a moonless sky, city lights blurring through my windshield. Sarah's advice echoed, "Stop chasing ghosts." Back in my apartment, I opened the diary again, flipping to a page from when I was 17, written in purple ink. "I won the art contest today." Mom said it was nice, but didn't come to the ceremony. Clara's debate trophy is on the mantel now. I traced the words, fingers trembling. I'd been a shadow, but not anymore. I stood, floor creaking, and walked to the window. The city hummed below, alive with strangers who didn't dismiss me. I whispered to the diary, to the girl who'd written those words, "No more shrinking." The scarf hung on its hook, a relic of a love that never bloomed. I grabbed a sketchpad and began to draw, the pencil scratch a rebellion against the silence I'd been fed. The lines formed a face. Mine, unapologetic, eyes fierce. It was the first time I'd drawn myself. Anger woke me before dawn, sharp and cold, like a blade honed overnight. I paced my apartment, the diary's weight heavy in my mind. Then I remembered the family cabin on Lake Willow, a place of childhood summers where I'd chased fireflies and sketched the water's edge. 2 years ago, when my parents faced foreclosure, I'd drained my savings, $38,000, to cover back taxes and legal fees. My mother had hugged me, arms trembling, and whispered, "This place is yours too." I'd clung to that promise like a lifeline. Now doubt gnawed. I grabbed my laptop, the screen's glow harsh in the pre-dawn dark, and searched old emails. Buried in a thread from the lawyer who'd handled the cabin's finances was a line that stopped my breath. Trust updated per your parents' request. My name wasn't mentioned. My pulse quickened, a drumbeat of betrayal. I needed proof, something to anchor the hurt. I drove to the storage unit on 5th Street, the city still asleep. The unit was a concrete crypt, its fluorescent lights buzzing like trapped wasps. I unlocked my bin, the air damp and musty, and dug through boxes labeled taxes and family. Dust coated my fingers as I sifted through receipts, old leases, a photo of me at 10, grinning by the lake with a sketchpad. Then I found it. A manila envelope, edges yellowed, labeled Lake Willow Docs. Inside was a notarized letter from 2023 stating I'd contributed $38,000 to the property's taxes. My parents' signatures were at the bottom, alongside a clause tying my contribution to shared ownership. But a second document, dated last year, amended the trust. My name was gone, replaced by Clara's as sole trustee. I sank to the concrete floor, papers trembling in my hands. They'd rewritten me out while I was recovering from a car accident, my body bruised, mind fogged by painkillers. I'd been in the hospital, alone, when they'd signed my erasure. The betrayal wasn't just financial. It was a theft of my loyalty, my love, the years I'd spent proving I belonged. The letter's ink was a silent scream, a testament to a sacrifice they'd buried. I needed to see the cabin, to feel its reality. I drove 2 hours to Lake Willow, the road winding through pines that whispered memories. The cabin stood weathered but proud, its cedar siding faded, the dock stretching into the lake like an outstretched hand. I walked to the water's edge, the air sharp with pine and algae. This was where I'd drawn my first real sketch, where I'd felt free. I'd saved this place, poured my heart into it, and they'd stolen it. I clutched the letter, its edges crumpling, and whispered, "This is mine too." Back home, I drafted an email to Jenna, a lawyer friend from college, found documents about a family trust. They cut me out. "Can we fight this?" I attached scans of the letter and amendment, hands shaking as I hit send. Her reply came within the hour. "This is solid. Mediation's your best shot. You've got a case." I stared at the screen, resolve hardening like clay in a kiln. I called Mr. Ellis, a family acquaintance who'd notarized the original letter. His voice was gravelly but kind. "Lila, I remember you," he said. "That contribution was significant." I asked about the amendment. He paused, then sighed. "It was signed while you were in the hospital. I thought you'd been consulted." My breath caught. "No," I said, "I wasn't." The truth settled like ash. They'd planned it, timed it, knowing I couldn't fight back. I returned to my apartment, the envelope on my kitchen counter like a gravestone. I opened my sketchpad, drawing the lake as I'd seen it, wild, free, not theirs to steal. The pencil's scratch was a vow. I'd confront them, not for revenge, but to reclaim my place. The drive to my parents' house was a pilgrimage through a battlefield of memory. The notarized letter and trust amendment sat in a folder on the passenger seat, their weight grounding me. The maple tree's leaves whispered as I parked, the house's blue shutters unchanged but distant, like a painting I no longer belonged to. I stepped out, navy blouse crisp, no jewelry, no softness. Just me, unapologetic. My mother opened the door, face a mask of cautious surprise. Lila? We weren't expecting you. Her eyes flicked to the folder, but she didn't ask. I stepped inside, the air thick with coffee and her perfume's tang. Clara was in the living room, scrolling her phone, posture perfect. My father looked up from his armchair, newspaper folding shut with a rustle. I'm not here for brunch, I said, setting the folder on the coffee table. My voice was steady, pulse racing. You removed me from the Lake Willow Trust while I was in the hospital. Clara scoffed, not looking up. Lila, you're blowing this out of proportion. My mother sat, hands clasped, rings glinting. We thought it was best. You weren't stable. Stable? I opened the folder, sliding the notarized letter toward them. I paid $38,000 to save that cabin. You signed this, promising me a share. Then you erased me. My father rubbed his temples, silent. Clara leaned forward, voice sharp. You were a mess after the accident. We made a practical choice. Practical? I met her eyes, unflinching. You stole my place in this family while I was unconscious. I laid out the amended trust, date circled in red. This was planned. You didn't forget me. You chose to exclude me. My mother's lips tightened. We didn't mean to hurt you, Lila. It was for the family's future. My father spoke, voice low. We thought you'd understand. Understand? I stood, shadow falling across the table. I understand you've never seen me. You banked on my silence. I placed a letter from my lawyer outlining mediation. My lawyer will handle this. I'm done asking for what's mine. Clara's eyes narrowed. You're making a mistake, Lila. This will tear us apart. My mother interjected, voice sharp. You've always been so dramatic. We did what we had to. My father shifted, finally meeting my eyes. Lila, let's talk this through. Talk? I laughed, bitter. You had years to talk. You chose silence. I grabbed my folder, the air heavy with their defensiveness. Clara stood, blocking my path. You're ungrateful. We gave you everything. I looked at her, calm. You gave me crumbs and called it a feast. I stepped past, the door clicking shut behind me. The lilac scent was faint but grounding. My chest felt lighter, a skin shed. A week later, I stood in a community center's auditorium, air smelling of coffee and old books. The local art collective's Voices Unheard panel had invited me to speak about overlooked creators, and I'd accepted, driven to reclaim my voice. My hands were steady as I adjusted the mic, the notarized letter in my bag like a talisman. The room was half full, artists, strangers, gallery acquaintances, their faces open, expectant. Hi, I'm Lila, I began, voice clear. For years, I thought my worth depended on being quiet, not making waves. I thought if I was small enough, I'd be loved. I paused, diary's words echoing. But silence doesn't earn a seat at the table. It makes you easier to ignore. I shared my journey, not naming my family, but speaking of invisibility, of love unreturned. A woman in the front row nodded, eyes wet. A man in the back leaned forward, pen still. I looked out, voice softening. Tell me, have you ever felt invisible in your own story? Heads nodded, a ripple of connection. I continued, describing my art, the award, the scones no one touched. Small acts don't make you small, I said. They make you human. Then I heard her, Clara, heels clicking like a metronome. She stepped to a mic, smile practiced. I'm Clara, Lila's sister, she said, voice sweet but sharp. I want to clarify. Lila's been through a lot, and we support her, but her perspective is skewed. She's emotional, always has been. The room tensed, whispers rippling. I didn't flinch. I pulled the notarized letter from my bag, holding it up. This is a letter my parents signed, acknowledging my $38,000 contribution to our family's cabin. They removed me from the trust while I was in the hospital. That's not emotion, that's fact. I tucked it away, voice steady. I spent 29 years shrinking to fit their story. I'm done. Clara's smile tightened. Lila, you're twisting things. We were protecting the family. I turned to her, calm. You were protecting your version of it. I faced the audience. This letter isn't just paper, it's proof I existed, even when they pretended I didn't. A woman stood, clapping, followed by others. A man shouted, "Speak your truth!" Clara's face hardened, and she left, heels fading. The applause wasn't loud, but it was enough. I felt seen, not by my family, but by strangers who'd heard my truth. 3 weeks later, an envelope arrived from my father's lawyer. Inside was a handwritten note, dated before his heart surgery. Lila, I was wrong. You held us together when we didn't deserve it. Attached was an addendum to the trust, reinstating my share of the Lake Willow cabin. It wasn't an apology, but an acknowledgement, a crack in their wall. I didn't return to their house. Instead, I rented a cottage an hour from the city, its walls bare but brimming with possibility. I painted them sage green, hung my award-winning designs, and placed a photo on the mantel. Me at 10, sketching by the lake, lavender scarf tied in my hair. Beside it, I framed a diary page, its words no longer a wound, but a testament. Someday, I'll be enough. I started teaching a creative writing class at the community center. My first session, a semicircle of teenagers with wary eyes. Lily, 15, raised her hand hesitantly. "Does it ever stop hurting?" she asked, voice small. I paused, seeing myself in her. "Not always," I said, "but it stops defining you." She nodded, a spark of belief in her eyes. Later, she showed me a poem, raw and aching, about being unseen. I critiqued it gently, my words a bridge to her courage. "Keep writing," I said. "Your voice matters." She smiled, and I felt the chain break, not just for me, but for her. One evening, I drove to the lake, the cabin's silhouette dark against the water. I didn't go inside. Instead, I sat on the dock, sketching the ripples, the scarf loose around my shoulders. I burned the last letter I'd written to my family, a draft of apologies I never owed. The flames curled the paper, ash rising into the starry sky. No tears, just release. I spoke to the darkness as if it could carry my voice to others like me. Tell me, have you ever felt invisible in your own story? I see you, and you're enough. The lake shimmered, its ripples a quiet promise. I was no longer unseen, not by Lily, not by the audience, not by myself. The scarf slipped to the dock, and I let it stay, a relic of a girl who'd learned to stand without it,